Madam Speaker, we have heard a bit thus far, so there are certain things I probably will not repeat unless it is important to re-emphasize. But I want to state from the outset that we are here to address in this smoking designated areas bill what is a public health issue, first of all. In fact, the purpose and objective of this bill as proposed is to promote public health by reducing exposure to tobacco and other smoke in certain public places by designating, and the member from number 6 would have said this before, by designating certain specified public places as smoking areas to prohibit smoking outside of a designated area in public places. So this bill is really a public health issue that we are addressing. And that is why I suppose there has been unanimous support thus far in the debate, because this will make the present situation better. In fact, I want to commend the Attorney General and his team for the extraordinary work that they have done on this bit of legislation that has attempted to, in one go, try to capture as many of the aspects needed to fulfill the goal of addressing the public health issue while maintaining the rights that people still have today. So this bill is exactly what is needed to facilitate people who wish to smoke, but also, and very importantly, to protect those who wish not to smoke or to be inundated by smoke. The bill creates a specified area called a designated area for smoking, while explicitly, with penalties, prohibiting and restricting smoking in public areas. Why I need to stress that is because when this bill was first announced, someone told me, but Konris, you all are facilitating the smokers. Now they're going to be anxious to go and smoke everywhere and blow smoke in my face, etc. And I had to tell the person, actually, it is quite the opposite. This bill is meant to protect persons like yourself who have no desire to smell or to inhale any type of smoke. And so I wish to make it clear that this bill protects persons who wish not to have anything to do with smoke, while providing an area for those who wish to partake in smoking, if it is their belief that they are to do so, or if it is they want to have to smoke and suffer whatever the consequences are. Now, why is it necessary, Madam Speaker, to have designated areas to protect, for instance, non-smokers from second-hand smoke? I want, if you would permit me to quote from the CDC, just to emphasize the dangers that have been identified with respect to second-hand smoke. I think the point has been clearly made that if people are aware of the consequences of their actions and they wish to pursue whatever those consequences are, they must do so while not infringing upon the rights and freedoms of others. And so second-hand smoke is a consequence of someone enjoying their own right to partake in smoking. But the science is very well proven and accepted that there are serious consequences and health problems associated with secondhand smoke. And so allow me to just pull a summary here from the CDC, which says there is no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke. Even brief exposure can cause immediate harm. Health problems caused by secondhand smoke in adults who do not smoke include coronary heart disease. That's how we pronounce that, doctor? Coronary heart disease, stroke, and lung cancer, as well as adverse reproductive health effects in women, including low birth weight. Secondhand smoke can cause sudden infant death syndrome, known as SIDS, respiratory infections, ear infections, and asthma attacks in infants and children. Just to get a little more, just a bit more specific before we move on, there is no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke. People who do not smoke, who are exposed to secondhand smoke, even for a short time, can suffer harmful health effects. In adults who do not smoke, secondhand smoke exposure can cause, as we spoke earlier about the different diseases, it can also result in premature death. Secondhand smoke can cause adverse reproductive health effects in women, as I said before. I think they're just repeating some of the things there. That was a summary that I read. Importantly, since they have started tracking secondhand smoke, they have recorded at least 2.5 million people who did not smoke at all, who died from health problems caused by secondhand smoke exposure. And so it is a serious public health concern for secondhand smoke. And what this bit of legislation does is to protect the general public from secondhand smoke, while giving those who wish to smoke an opportunity to do so. And I think we ought to be responsible, just as the cigarette makers are asked to be responsible and put labels on their boxes to indicate what are some of the effects of smoking. I think it would be remiss for us not to speak a little bit about some of the effects of smoking as well, even as we appreciate people's right to choose if they want to partake in smoking. Smoking harms nearly every organ of the body, causes many diseases, and reduces the health of smokers in general. Right? For instance, cigarette smoking causes more than 480,000 deaths each year in the United States. This is nearly 1 in 5 deaths. Smoking causes more deaths each year than the following causes combined: HIV, illegal drug use, alcohol use, motor vehicle injuries, fire-related incidents. More than 10 times as many US citizens have died prematurely from cigarette smoking than have died in all the wars fought by the United States. Smoking causes about 90% of all lung cancer deaths. More women die from lung cancer each year than from breast cancer. Smoking causes about 80% of all deaths from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Cigarette smoking increases risk for death from all causes in men and women. The risk of dying from cigarette smoke has increased over the last 50 years in the US. This is just a brief summary to understand and appreciate that we understand what are the effects and the health, public health concerns with respect to smoking. And everybody must be aware of these things, and such that when they decide to partake, they understand the consequences. Now, Madam Speaker, as we look at the legislation, I think, as I said before, it is a very well done piece of legislation. And the member from number 6 said if he was age, he could not have done it any better. But I encourage persons to get the legislation and read it for yourself so that you understand what the government is trying to do and what this parliament is being asked to consider. I think it has laid out very succinctly the aspects of why it is important to have designated areas and how we will achieve that. And in my presentation, I would want to address some of the concerns raised by members opposite. Firstly, with respect to the legislation, as we mentioned before, and I want to read this so that everybody is clear. Section 3 of this legislation is entitled Smoking Prohibited in Public Places. I want everyone to understand this. All the young men, young women, middle-aged, old, whomever you are, the piece of legislation we are debating here today says that a person shall not smoke in a public place. And it has listed what are public places. All commercial, agricultural, industrial zone lands and properties, bars, drinking places, restaurants, clubs, tourist establishments, hotels, guest house, schools, all other educational institutions, hospitals, whether publicly or privately operated, churches or other religious establishments, except as is permitted under the Act or any other law. Correctional facilities, public transportation, community centers, roads, highways, thoroughfares, government offices, and other places of businesses, buildings of all types accessible to the public. So when this bill is passed, I would like everyone to know that smoking is now prohibited in public. That's the first thing that this piece of legislation does. And if a person contravenes this act, you will be issued, or you can be issued with a fixed penalty notice for $500. We had a recommendation. I don't know if the member from number 9 was saying 500 is too low, but I guess that is something that we can evaluate. But if you are caught smoking in public, if I am advised correctly, by this piece of legislation, you face a $500 fine and in a $500 ticket, and in default of payment shall be liable to perform up to 20 hours of community service, or in default of performing the 20 hours of community service, to imprisonment for 5 days for smoking in public. So, if you want to take anything from this as the first thing in this bill, do not smoke in public. Unless, and the bill will go into the unless. Do not smoke in public unless you are smoking in a designated area. So no longer can you just choose to pull up anywhere, at any party, at any joint, at any festival, anywhere, any football game, outside the church, outside the school, on the street. You're not allowed to smoke. However, the bill goes on to consider those who wish to exercise their own right to smoke by establishing in Section 4 designated smoking areas, which says that any person, partnership, director of a company or lawful entity may apply to the chief medical officer for a license declaring a designated smoking area. In any public place in which the applicant operates a business or for a particular event or series of events in a public place. So you can now have a designated area. And the member from number 9 raised the issue of whether or not we should have one licensing authority for all of these different suites, all of these different pieces of legislation that we're bringing here today. And I think that, if I may respectfully disagree from that notion, in that the different licenses are achieving different things. It is similar to someone applying for, as I mentioned, a food handler's license. Somebody has to come to inspect the place to ensure that you should be able to sell food. That's not the same set of people who are necessarily going to give you the business license to operate. Additionally, this license for the designated smoking area is not for you to smoke. It is for you to have a designated area that has been tested and approved as an area to smoke. While the license for the other bill that we will discuss later, freedom of conscience, is where you will get the permit based on your religious affiliation to be able to carry and possess certain quantities of cannabis. Have I said that right, Mr. AG? Okay. So this piece of legislation prohibits smoking in public places and identifies designated smoking spaces. I want people, remember I said I would like everyone to take an opportunity to read the bill because it really explains everything, and I'll pull out one or two other areas. In section 4(6), the chief medical officer, after consultation with the chief fire officer, shall inform any successful applicant of any mandatory fire safety and other public health and safety requirements before issuing a license pursuant to subsection 1. So there is going to be a check of the premises. Make sure there's not a fire hazard. Make sure there is no other public health safety concerns. If you break these things that have been outlined in the Act, your license can be revoked. So you have to keep up to the times and up to the law. Otherwise, your license will be revoked. I think the member of number 6 spoke about this, the display of license and signage, that they must be displayed in specific areas and they must be of a certain size. So you don't just chuck it in a small corner and say that you have it. You must be able to say it. Now I wanted to address another issue that the member from number 9 raised, which was the issue of the practical implication or implementation of having a designated area. If you put people in one area, will the smoke then go up and swing around and end up in people's faces and so on? Well, the legislation also contemplates that. I am advised by the learned Minister of Tourism that for music festival, the designated area is an enclosed area. And so patrons of music festivals should not be concerned that smoke from the designated area will infringe upon their rights to have a smoke-free music festival as well. And the legislation also considers that you cannot get a license, really, unless your facility prevents the smoke from that area going into a public area where people might be. And so section 13, subsection 2 says, if a smoke-free area forms, now a smoke-free area is all public areas, if a smoke-free area forms part of a public place in which smoking is elsewhere allowed, by license issued pursuant to section 4, the licensee and any person under his or her or its direction or control must take reasonable steps to prevent smoke caused by smoking in the designated smoking area from penetrating the smoke-free area. So it is required of the designated area to not allow their smoke to enter into the smoke-free area. And so I wanted to reassure persons that it's just not necessarily that someone who has an open bar that is upwind to a number of homes or businesses can apply for a smoking designated area license and will be granted. No, we're going to check whether or not the U can contain the smoke that is happening in your designated area. Additionally, the legislation allows for the minister, as we go along this new path, to create regulations that can decide, for instance, the size of a building, how much ventilation it should have, all of those nice things to ensure that persons who wish to smoke, they have their area, and persons who do not wish to smoke, they have their area. Recently, as they were mentioning, I was traveling through an airport, and I'm walking in the airport, and you see all the smokers behind a glass door, puffing and so on, and I can't smell a thing. Because that's a designated area. They probably have ventilation system that is taking that out, and for all I know, they're probably purifying that air before they let it get out as well. And so that is what we're going to get to, and those things will come in the regulations. So, I think those were the key points that were raised from the members opposite. I want to also stress that one of the other things was, education of the people. That is why we have to bring the suite of legislation together. There are a number of things: the smoking designated areas, the Rastafari bill, the drug prevention bill, and the freedom of conscience bill. They have come together because once we have passed them to this honorable house, I know the AG is excited. You all haven't seen yet, but he has some boards here which he wants to start the education campaign one time that is showing you what the do's and don'ts are as it relates to this suite of documents, suite of legislation. And so yes, the government will pursue an education campaign so that people can understand collectively what these pieces of legislation mean and how we can educate the public going forward. And I know that even as it relates to the public health side of things, the Prime Minister is going to ensure that we are well aware and informed across our school system and our healthcare system about the benefits or the non-benefits of engaging in particular activities. And so we are confident that we are on the right path with respect to education. We spoke about the size of the fine already, that we are open to have a discussion as to whether we think $500 is not enough. And I already spoke about the licensing authority, why it is needed to be kept separate. The license that, or the card, conscience card that you're going to get from the Ministry of Faith-Based Affairs is something completely different from the license for you to have a designated smoking area, right? The designated smoking area are for event promoters, for businesses. You know, that's going to actually be a much smaller group, we suppose, than the ones who would say, conscience card, this is my thing, this is my religion, this is my sacrament. That's completely different to issuing the license for a designated area. So therefore, with those words, Madam Speaker, I would want to wish this bill safe passage, and I think it is a very progressive bill in line with what the rest of the Caribbean is seeking to do and what many of the developed countries around the world have done in identifying that there are public health concerns with smoking, but you have the right to partake if you wish, but you cannot infringe upon others who do not wish. And so from today, when this bill is passed, there is no smoking in public areas, and people will have to apply to get a designated area to facilitate customers or people who wish to partake in smoking. Great job, Mr. AG, and congratulations, Mr. Mover of the bill, Mr. PM, for this progressive step on behalf of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. May it please you, Madam Speaker.